Hello and welcome. This is Nathan from the AARPGs. This is our last silver alert for GenCon 2023. It's day 3. We are in the Paizo booth. I'm with Thurston Hillman, who manages the Starfinder line.
Yes, I am the managing creative director for Starfinder here at Paizo.
Matt here is a huge Starfinder fan. He probably wishes he was talking to you, but you know, I'm the face, so
stay behind the camera.
But yeah, glad we got a chance to talk to you. This is great. We heard the news this week, which we'll talk about in a second.
Yeah.
But first, I want to get to know you a little bit.
Oh, sure.
How long have you been with Paizo?
So I've been with Paizo as a freelancer. I started off with back, like 15 years ago, 14 years ago or so. I started writing in the first season of their organized play program as a freelancer. Okay. And then eventually I started freelancing full-time for them. I kind of lost my job. I ended up doing full-time freelance, and then they hired me, about 7 years ago.
Okay.
Now. Yeah. It's actually, 6 years ago, because I hired me just about the time Starfinder originally released, the first edition, yeah.
Yeah, time has no meaning anymore, so I'm not going to...
Yeah, it's very true.
But now, as a freelancer, was it only Paizo stuff that you were working on? Or?
No, I've worked for a few different companies. I've done work for EN World. I did help on some of their adventure paths when they started those up. I've done work for Cubicle 7 is another company I've worked with. Yeah, I've kind of been around in the industry doing and then a variety of smaller third-party companies as well.
That's great. I've got some friends that are starting off in the industry and cutting the teeth right now. But I think it's pretty exciting that both you and we just talked to Louise. You both started out as freelancers and both got in. And I think it's kind of the dream for a lot of folks out there that are doing the hard freelance work right now. And so that's great. They're able to kind of get like a full-time gig.
Absolutely. It's funny, we're doing hiring right now, and certainly there's a lot of familiar names in there. Actually the hiring person's closed, but we're in the testing process. Sorry. But take a look at our careers page. You're good. But there's a lot of familiar names, and this is a community where you kind of get to know people. Yeah. You see their work. They bounce around. They work for different companies. That's we're a big community, as you can tell from GenCon, but we're also a small community too.
Yeah. It really is. We went to dinner with some folks the other night, and there was 4 different sets of people, and they're all kind of linked just through some tiny little Kevin Bacon connections.
Oh, so. Of course, yep.
But anyway, from your freelance stuff, still trying to get to know you a little bit. What's some of your favorite work from those days?
Oh gosh, I did a lot of adventure path work for Paizo. So the monthly adventure paths we did. I started off with a adventure in the Hell's Vengeance series called Wrath of Thurstons. The first thing I ever wrote for the adventure path line was we're gonna do the evil adventure path. So that was I can just let my inner jerk run wild and assume the players are evil for once. So that's cool. And then I got to do some really fun, just alternative, different style of adventures. I did the first in the War for the Crown adventure path, Crownfall, which was one of the later Pathfinder First Edition adventure paths. And that one had a lot of social intrigue and influencing. And it also just let me have an evil clown halfling villain and, fun stuff like that.
So what's the process like when you brought up the idea? Okay, I'm gonna have this evil clown halfling. Well, what is this Was this through email, or you on the phone, or a conference? Like how do you bring that up, and what's your initial reaction to that kind of thing?
So it kind of evolves, right? Because you'll get an outline and it'll give you sort of the main story beats your developer wants you to hit, and then you'll get you'll do an expanded outline where you come back and it's okay, so here are the beats, I'm gonna hit them, but I want this to be here and this to be there. And I remember, because my developer at the time, Crystal Fraser, she would reply back and be I'm being held hostage because this crazy person is wants a clown. It's yes, also you want a sentient awakened rat who casts spells as a boss. Yes, Mr. Hellman. You kind of just throw stuff out there, because sometimes you're writing at 3 a.m. in the morning and just need to get it done and want to throw some ideas out there, and you see what sticks.
I feel like you really, something's in your head, you have to put it down on paper and try it out, because if if it's bringing you joy internally, then you really need to share that with other folks.
Absolutely.
So, that's great. So, and what are do you have any like media influences, music or books that you kind of draw from as inspiration?
Far too many. Okay, well, I'm a huge Warhammer 40,000 fan.
Okay.
So that's that's I have way more miniatures than common sense. So that is certainly a big inspiration. I take a lot of inspiration too from video games. I play a variety of different games. From classic like RPGs like Final Fantasy to more modern games. Books, it sort of runs the gamut. Like I consume most of my media through audiobooks now because I do a lot of painting of my massive hoard of miniatures. So it's like combining things at once. And what I really take a lot of inspiration from is just other role-playing games, other games out there. Yeah. I think one of the telltale signs of someone who can like really get involved in this industry is that you play the games, but you play multiple games. You see what else is out there and what's going on.
I tell people all the time, anytime anybody starts to hint at to ask is it's life's too short to only play one game. Oh,
so absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about Starfinder. How did Starfinder come about?
Oh, so my starting with Starfinder, so of course, we had the highly successful Pathfinder role-playing game. At that time, it was in its first edition. They were starting development on second edition at that point, but they knew they wanted something to sort of put out in the interim period while that was happening. So it was discussed Starfinder would be this product, and it was developed by a team here at Paizo, designed, I should say, by a team here at Paizo. And at the time, I was a freelancer, and they approached me because I had been doing a lot of work with organized play. And they needed someone to run organized play for Starfinder because they didn't have anyone. And so they asked me if I would be willing. I'd been, again, freelancing full time. If, hey, would you like to come on and sort of run the program, do all the creative work on the program? And then I got sort of brought in that point in the process. Starfinder was sort of always like originally envisioned as like, okay, we'll release like these core books and an adventure path, and that'll probably be, and then it just took off, right? Yeah, like that GenCon, the books flew out of the door. We had multiple places selling them, and they were all disappearing. So
yeah, my local game store has games and stuff in Maryland. There's a huge section. It's just all like tons and tons of Starfinder books.
Oh, yeah.
It's
certainly
prolific.
Grown now. And then that was the thing at the beginning. We only thought we were going to do a couple books of it, and then it just sold immensely well. But we've come a long ways. It's been 6 years now that the game's been out. We've released countless adventure paths, over 50 adventure path volumes. We've been releasing hardback rule books and beginner box and accessories, all of that to create a really large and cohesive product line.
Mm-hmm. Now, out of the ancestries that are in Starfinder, which one is your favorite?
The Alien Archive 4, the Jabubnan. It's a like one-legged tree frog thing. Look it up. It's the most adorable artwork. Also, I wrote it, but I just loved it when I got the artwork. So I'm being a little bit, If I had to pick though, aside from that, something I didn't do, I'd say the Astrozoans are really cool. They're like a kind of starfish people, but they're shape changers, so they can adopt whatever form. But their natural form is like this fleshy starfish. Our game has a lot of weird stuff.
I noticed there's plenty of that. So I just saw, like, when we got here, that Starfinder 2 was announced.
Yes, Starfinder 2nd edition.
Nervous?
Kind of elated, actually, because I've been sitting on this for a long time. Like, this has been an internal thing for a while.
Yeah.
And then recent events sort of pushed it up the priority. We want it to be compatible with our orc license, so that required some immediate movement in this direction. But really, the team has just been so hard at work on this concepting, doing the development, getting internal playtests. That's one of the most joyous things now I can start talking about. But there's always that oh gosh, what are people going to think about it? But honestly, it's just been really exciting. Like the community's come behind it in a good way. We've seen a lot of excitement from the Pathfinder 2nd edition crowd, because one of the big things we announced was it's going to be fully compatible with Pathfinder 2nd edition.
Yeah, I saw that. I was like, oh, that's really, to me, that's brilliant, because we like systems where you can kind of pull things from one and throw it in, and you could do some really crazy crazy stuff.
We had a playtest last week, in fact, where we pulled a Pathfinder 2nd Edition gunslinger and put them into our Starfinder party to see how things would work together.
Yeah, how'd it work out?
It worked out really well. The gunslinger decided he would do nothing but crit for 3 rounds, and we looked at all of our math and went, wow, these Pathfinder 2nd Edition classes are broken. They're way out damaging us. And then on like the 3rd or 4th round, his gun misfired and blew up in his hands, and then it was like, oh, that's why they're problematic. So we had this like fun, interesting interaction. And one of the funniest moments from that, and I think is very just indicative of the game that we're creating and how it has this science fantasy feel, is one of the spells that our Mystic class has is this spell called Motivating Ringtone, where it's a healing spell that has your like cell phone go off and give you like this pump up music, and you can choose to keep the music going for continual benefits.
Yeah.
So our Mystic has to heal this gunslinger who's got himself in a bad situation, and his gun is now blown up, and it's like, okay, well, I'm going to heal him. I can cast this spell. And we all look at each other. Oh, he doesn't have a cell phone.
Yeah.
And everyone was like, oh, no. And it was just this fun moment where we saw how it would work in cross-compatibility.
That's really cool. What would you say are maybe the top 3 mechanics changes that you see that you can talk about?
Okay, so there aren't going to be mechanics changes. And this is what I say. When we talk about 100% compatibility, this isn't like a buzz term we're throwing out here. This isn't like maybe prior editions of games where you've seen like, oh, I'm going to have to learn a whole new type of bonus that's going to be on these sheets and use like some new like system that's going to be in every monster or whatever. No, this is 100% compatible. So it's not that there's going to be, completely new mechanics you have to learn. It's going to be taking a look at some of the mechanics that exist and maybe tweaking them in different ways. So a good example of this, to start us off, is our equipment. In Pathfinder 2nd Edition, you buy a sword and then you start putting weapon runes on it, and that sort of upgrades its efficiency.
Yeah.
In Starfinder, you're going to have your gun that you buy, and that's going to be, almost every gun's going to start off at a commercial level. And then you can upgrade it to a tactical, and then an advanced, and we sort of have this rising scale that we have. Now, we want to make sure, one thing we got a lot of feedback on in Starfinder 1st Edition was that people didn't like constantly throwing their guns into a wood chipper when they get the new version. So we were going to have a system in place where the player, if you have that little commercial laser pistol and Grandma gave it to you and it's Granny's gun, you're going to be able to upgrade that throughout the course of the campaign. But that's going to be different. That's going to be it's. You can see that the rules work all the same, and in fact, like the way those initial items scale is based off of the weapon runes for Pathfinder 2nd Edition.
Okay.
So, you'll have your regular gun, then your one that gets a +1 to hit, then your one that does extra damage, and so on and so forth. But that's rules people know. It's not a new mechanic. We're just really like reflavoring and reworking the mechanic.
Yeah, and I think that'll be easier to manage as the players level up. It's like, okay, I'm just upgrading my weapon. I'm not going out and going through spreadsheets to choose out, we got a new weapon.
And the other thing too is that we're going to have, so we won't have a ton of like new mechanics. And when we have new mechanics, they're going to be bespoke things. Like when we get into things like Starship Combat, certainly that's going to be, new mechanics that we're going to have to work on. But the games where they're really different is actually in something I term the meta of the game. The state of the game is different because in Pathfinder, we sort of have some blocks in our ancestries that you can't get access to flying. Even if you're like a winged species, you don't get access to flying right away because that can cause some real big game balance issues, especially in a game where you're like, we're fighting in 10-foot corridors with great swords. Well, the one winged guy with a short bow is king, right? And God forbid you're fighting outside. Well, in our game, everyone has a laser gun, so flying isn't as prevalent. So we can actually have species that have more of like, you can fly naturally at first level. That also means like when we're designing our combat encounters, you might be shooting guns down a hall at each other, and we want to simulate that rather than melee is king and you always want to be in melee.
Okay, that makes sense. Is there, as far as Starfinder goes, is there anything that you're showing at the show that's new? Or?
So the newest thing we have here is certainly our Ports of Call book that was released just a few months ago.
Okay.
And that's for Starfinder 1st Edition. It's showing off of several new Ports of Call, as we call them, that are settlements. And it gives you a whole bunch of different places to base your campaigns out of, to have your campaigns go and visit. Good example, one of the planets we have is Galarian World, the theme park world that's based on Lost Galarian, the world from Pathfinder. But we have other ones in there. We have a district of our large mega settlement, Absalom Station. We have a planet that's kind of contested between Neveska and Aslanti. There's all these little settlements we have in there, and each of them come with some bespoke rules as well. So maybe some new feats, new spells, new equipment that's all related. So there's mechanics throughout, as well as some new species in the book, some new rules for like starship trading. But what's really cool about that book in my mind is it's the first time we look at the galaxy, and we provide you a poster map of the galaxy in there as well. That's kind of the newest book we have here at the show. But what we have coming up is in October, our next Starfinder first edition release is going to be Starfinder Enhanced, which is a toolbox of new rules for the game. Just a ton of new mechanics, 4 pages for each class of new mechanics. And then also 4 of the classes we have, we're enhancing them, which is we're going to give them basically a 1-page overview that's like, hey, we've noticed maybe some of these interactions in game aren't working how we want after 6 years.
Right.
Let's give you some new ways to maybe run this class.
Okay. Oh, that's fun. Any examples?
Yeah, so a good example of that would be the Envoy. The Envoy class is someone where it's often suffered from this problem of like, do I spend my round and my turn buffing someone else and then letting them get the glory, or do I, get to shoot a gun? Well, we have some options in there now that let them use their abilities, but also in using those abilities, they can still do something like fire a pistol now and get some action for themselves.
Yeah, it's fun to shoot stuff.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Well, that's great. And is there any kind of time? I know you can probably get specifics. Is there any time frames for Starfinder 2?
Yes, absolutely. So our intent is to have a playtest rule book out next summer, 2024. You can probably guess around when. And then we want to have the full game released by 2025, summer 2025. Okay. So we're looking at a 2-year. And part of the reason we announced it so early is, one, we know people are playing first edition. We want to give them time. We don't want to surprise people and be like, aha, 3 months, your campaign. And we're not coming in, we're not taking your books away from you or anything like that. What we want to do is give you time, if you're interested in joining us on this journey, give you time to set up those campaigns, finish them off and whatnot, so that you can join us for the next step. Now, along with this, if you go to starfinderplaytest.com, which is sort of the hub for everything related to second edition, we put out, starting with this show, a field test. And it's not a play test. These field tests are, here's a look behind the scenes at what we're playing around with internally for development. So you get levels 1 through 5 of the new soldier right now. Okay. And that is like, there are problems with it. We even know there's problems with it, but we wanted to print it and show, this is what we're kind of experimenting with, to give you behind the scenes on what we're doing.
Mindset.
Exactly. We actually have sidebars in it from this adorable little Skittermander hologram named Captain Concierge, who tells you what the team's thinking. Just like, hey, the approach was this. We wanted to try this. We wanted to see how this would work.
That's great. So, and I definitely do appreciate you put this out so early, and looking at your tables over there, it doesn't seem to have affected how many people are buying Starfinder, because you're almost out.
We have very few remaining. In fact, I think what's on the table is what's left for a lot of it. So it's just great to have it this year.
Yeah, that's a good problem to have. Yeah. But anything you want to leave us with, Thurston? Any other?
All right, so yeah, I really wanted to shout out my team. So there's myself as sort of the manager of it, but then there's our senior developer, Jenny Jarzabski. She's at the show, probably selling fans on mechs right now, because she has an adventure path called Mechageddon that's going to be coming out in the spring. Along with that, we have our developer, Dustin Knight. He's our most recent addition to the team. He's been really helping us out with some of the design work that we're doing on the new edition. And then also Jessica Catalan, who's the Starfinder Society developer. Okay. She's been doing a great job keeping the Starfinder Society program going, writing the scenarios and developing them for the events we put on here. And I just want to give them a shout out, because we're a team here.
Yeah, it takes a lot of people to put out that many books. So
yes,
it's fabulous. Yeah. Thurston, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk to you and talk to Paizo. This has been great for us. Thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you next time.
StarfinderPlaytest.com.